So, hi everybody and welcome back to the C++ tutorial series for absolute beginners. This is video 250 and in this video we talk again about this code here. We already talked about the first part here on top, but now we will talk about this part here. And for this purpose I made here in Paint again a diagram. You can see the struct B here is my top here, and then I made X here as my virtual derivative class. Let's make here an arrow, and then I make this for Y as well. And then you can see the struct AA is inheriting from X and Y here. All right, so far so nice. And we already talked a little bit about this, but interesting is now on this last line there is something new and a little bit irritating, because in one of my other videos I said that when we make a constructor call in the initializer list here, for example, that you can call only your parent's constructor to set the value, and you can't call the parent's constructor. And the strange thing about this line here is when we watch the constructor call here and the initializer list here, we are calling here B3. What means this B3? B3 means I'm not calling here X or Y, which is the normal thing which I should call the constructor from X, Y. I'm calling directly B, struct B, right? And this is against the thing what I told you. This is normally not allowed in C++. So the question is now why it is here allowed. And this is a special rule which we are going to learn here, is when we use virtual derivative classes like the struct X here and struct Y, there is a conflict. The conflict is which of them is creating the shared base, because we already know virtual means this both classes or structs here will share a base. They will not create separate base, but the question is which one is creating this base. And because this one is a conflict in C++, it is solved that the most derivative class is calling the constructor instead. Let him call this derivative class, also the virtual derivative classes. This sounds a little bit complicated. It is complicated, especially when we read here this text here. So don't worry if you don't understand this instantly. You have the best thing is that you also try to find online, a good online book or online sources to dive a little bit more into this thematic where it is explained a little bit more with more information. You can see this presentation is again a compact presentation. Compact presentation means most time a bad presentation, because you need here pre-knowledge to understand this, and here is not is also not shown all variation what comes with this with this new knowledge. So it is normally bad, but they are anyway just for, I would say it's just more like a introduction than a real explanation. Why is that so? But if you understand this one, it's very good. But let's go again, the same thing here in my diagram, what it really means. So the new thing here in this diagram is that X here and Y here is not calling the constructor if and only if there is one more derivative class, and we have here one more derivative class, and then this most derivative class, so this is here, this AA is then the most derivative class, will call the constructor for X and Y if they both are virtual, and in this case they are both virtual. So which means what happens here is the constructor, when we try to create an object, you can see here AA, we try to create an object. Let's write here as well. So I try create here this AA object. So here, when I try to make this one, what happens is the constructor goes into AA. right? Because it's an AA object. All right, here we do this. What happens is this constructor goes to this line. Then the constructor sees, first of all, oh, wait a minute, this struct AA use inheritance. I know this one is not complete. I will not construct this here. So, and then the constructor says, okay, but we have here a special case. And the special case is this X here and this Y here. This here we can see have virtual bases. You can see we inherit here a virtual base, which means the new special rule is because they have virtual bases, my job is to initialize this virtual base for them. They are not using them in this case. So what happens is my AA here sees, okay, X and Y, you are virtual. My job is now to create for you the virtual initialize, not create, initialize the virtual base. So the constructor jumps up here on top and initialize B for them. And this is normally not allowed, like I said before. This is the new thing, the new rule. And this happens only if they have a virtual base and if AA is the most derived class. And if you understand this, this is very good. And then you have also keep in mind what happens then when we call X and Y constructor. You can see here in the initializer list, we have X call constructor called and Y constructor call. What happens now with this B1 here and this B2, for example? And the answer is very simple, because AA has now initialized the virtual base here for them. This one. This here will be ignored in this special case, right? So which means B1 and B2 is never called here. Even we call here the constructor. So here again, it goes here, X goes here. Here's the initialize list, but because AA here has already initialized this virtual B here, this B is already initialized, this one will be ignored and this one also. And this is the new thing and a little bit complicated when you read it the first time. Don't worry, it's very hard to understand it actually at the first time. But when you dive into it, you will learn it. And like I said, try to find a good online resource, and you have also to practice this a little bit with variations. But if you understand this here, it's very good. If not, don't worry. I didn't understand it the first time too. It took me a while till I made some tests, and then it may click. All right, with that said, there is one more thing. So, but before we go to this one more thing, let's see how this whole thing, what I just explained to you, is formalized. And like I said, this text here is not, I think you already know it's not normal English. It is formalized English, and formalized English means all time hard to understand, because let's read it and then you will understand what I mean hard to understand. So let's read this first time. So all virtual base sub-objects are initialized before any non-virtual base sub-object. And that is actually, if you understand it already, very good, but this is the meaning of this one here. The first thing, let's see here. These are the virtual sub-objects. Let's put this one here for a moment. So this here, my virtual B here, virtual B. So here's my virtual base sub-object is initialized before any non-virtual base sub-object. Interesting is here when you read this line here, we have not even here a non-virtual base sub-object. You can see again, this example is not good, because then it would be better that we have here a non-virtual base sub-object also for testing what this really means. But the concept is the same. This two here will be just initialized before the first, right? And this is this one. We can say this one will be, the constructor will do this at the first. So that's why I make this one. And then the constructor will call this x and y. Again, here's the order very important. For example, here is x and y. Then will the constructor go to x and y here. I think, I'm not so sure myself, but I think it will go then here. We can see this later in a test. And then it goes here for the constructor calls. And you have to remember, because we initialize this one here, will be ignored. But let's read here this formalized text a little bit more. So it says is, so only the most derived class, and in my case it's AA, that is here this most derived class, calls the constructors of the virtual basis. And here we have the virtual basis for x and y. And that is this here, what I said. In this case, this one is calling that in the member initializer list. And this info here is also very important. In the member initializer list, careful. And this is also a mistake what many make. It means not this body here. Here, they are just referring to this member initializer list, because this body here behaves again a little bit different. And that's why I said this compact presentation is not very ideal for learning purposes, because there is again another rule which I will show you probably in the next video. Right now we try just to understand it. But important, that means we are only looking at this, not this. In this case, when I create it here with B3, this one and this one will be ignored. This is so the rule. Okay, let's, I hope you understood it a little bit. Don't worry, like I said, if you don't understand it at the first time, it's not so easy, I think. But if you understand it, very good. Then let's continue. Here is again this part here. This part here is, let's read this too and see if we understand this part now. So the default constructor of AA, here is our default constructor, calls the default constructors of x and y. And I said here, the default constructor of x and y is called. You can see this Q3. But why I made this one here? And the reason for that is, like before, this one is initialized before. But this one, x and y, is still called later here in the constructor. And let's read here a little bit more. But those constructors do not call the constructors of B, because B is a virtual base. So this one here and this one here is ignored. I called it at start. This one here and this one here will be ignored because we already initialized it in our most derived class AA. This one has initialized this one, and this one is ignored because here you can see in their example, because this A is the most derived class in this case. All right. So the question is now, wait a minute, if B1 and B2 is ignored because we have here struct AA, why we have this here in the initializer list if they are never used? And the answer for that is, careful, it is used, but not when we create AA, but when we create, for example, struct X only. And here is an example. When we try to create an object for X, then this initializer list for B1 is used. It is only ignored when we have one more derived class, then it's ignored. All right. And I think I stop here with this explanation, because this is not easy. So try to understand this, and again, try to find online a good C++ book or explanation. And we will make in the next video a little bit more code examples where I show you how the compiler is jumping up, initializing this base, and then interesting is also this body is behaving differently a little bit, because the short answer is this body here is probably not ignored. It means only this one is ignored. And that's why I said we will make again an example. And yeah, so I think that's a little bit complicated to understand, but if you understand it one time and understand some examples, then you have it, and then we can go on. All right, I think I stop here this video. And if you have questions like all time, write in the comment section. And in the next video, we will make here more code examples, also with this non-virtual base up object, because this is missing here. I will add here probably one more struct, which is non-virtual, so that you can see what it really means. It's constructed first and so on. All right, with that said, bye, good luck, have fun, see you next.